After a break of several years, we're pleased to be back, this time with a very special Centennial celebration of one of MacDowell's most illustrious fellows, James Baldwin. To tell us a little bit about Baldwin's time at MacDowell, I'd like to welcome MacDowell Fellow, the writer, and Baldwin scholar, Nicholas Boggs, whose book, Baldwin, A Love Story, will be out in March 2025, published by FSG. Nick?
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to be brief because I know how excited we are to get to this conversation. But as I walk us through Baldwin's 3 stays at MacDowell, which you have in your program, I want to emphasize 2 things, and that is that his stays there were both extraordinary and typical. Extraordinary because he was extraordinary, and the works he wrote there have such lasting historical import. But also typical because the schedule, the accommodations, and the respite and community that he found there is something that I found as a fellow, and I know many other people in the room who are fellows have also experienced. So this is his first residency, August 1st to August 31st, 1954. That is the Bates studio. So I've actually stayed in that studio in my first residency when I began the book. So I've just 2 things to say about it that stayed with me. It hadn't been renovated yet, so... So this meant, first of all, that in all the studios there are these tombstones that artists signed when they were there. So to be beginning my book on Baldwin, and there on the tombstone is his signature, was incredibly inspiring and moving. Second of all, just to be able to write in the space that he occupied, it taught me to really think of him as an embodied human being, not just an abstraction of someone who had written. For example, the unrenovated bathroom was very small, so when I sat down on the toilet, my legs could barely fit. And I remembered that Baldwin was 5'6", so it was the perfect bathroom for James Baldwin. Okay, on to him. So when his first time there, he went there to work on a novel he was calling Ignorant Armies, which eventually split off into 2 novels, Giovanni's Room and Another Country. But one of the incredible things about MacDowell is the freedom it gives its artists. You go there, you think you're going to do one thing, you're stuck, you end up doing something else. So what Baldwin actually mostly worked on there were 2 very important essays, Equal in Paris and Notes of a Native Son. Of course, Notes of a Native Son, famous essay where he sort of writes about coming to terms with his father's death, and it doubles as his attempt to come to terms with the realities of American racism growing up in Harlem. So he was encouraged to put this together into a collection by Sol Stein, a 3-time MacDowell Fellow and a high school classmate of his, who edited the book. And Sol Stein was there with him. In the picture, you will have seen him standing right next to him. Baldwin spent a month there, and on the trip back, Sol Stein drove him back. And this was a very harrowing experience because there was what Stein calls a biblical-sized deluge. The roads flooded, electric cables came crashing down, state troopers warned them it was dangerous to get out of the car. So this is what Stein wrote. Baldwin and I talked about turning back, but the road back appeared as treacherous as the road forward. So forward we went. In minutes, we were up and over the crest of the hill. Beneath us, the road had disappeared into a river overflowing its banks. As we rolled downhill toward the river with minimal traction, Baldwin sang out a lament. "This is going to be a sad day for American literature." Fortunately, they made it back safely, and of course, today, Notes of a Native Son is a classic and one of my very favorite Baldwin essays. So that was the first residency. The second residency was extraordinary, as you'll see, because it lasted 6 months, which is like unheard of in the history of MacDowell, because Baldwin loved it so much he kept coming back. He was back in the Bates studio once more. But this trip was especially important because he had recently come back from his first trip to the American South. His family had come from the South and had migrated, but he'd never been there. And he was very shaken and also politicized by this trip. So when he came to MacDowell, he worked on 2 very important essays for Harper's and also for Notes of a Native Son, Nobody Knows My Name for Partisan Review, and The Hard Kind of Courage. He had gone to Charlotte, where the schools were being desegregated. He went to Atlanta, where he rode a segregated bus for the first time. He also met Martin Luther King for the first time and was deeply moved by one of his sermons. But he was also really exhausted and upset when he came back. So coming to MacDowell provided another important thing that MacDowell does, which is sanctuary. He called it his sanctuary. So he wrote those essays, but he was also working on an adaptation for Actors Studio, actually, of Giovanni's Room. That never got the big screen, never got on the big stage, but there was a closed to the public reading of it, and that's where he met Lorraine Hansberry. And it was starring Engin Cezar, his very, very good friend from Istanbul, who became quite famous in Istanbul years later. But they started writing letters, and so I do want to read a bit from one of Baldwin's letters because it's the quintessential description to me of the MacDowell experience. This is Baldwin writing to his friend. Have a room and a bath, big, comfortable, anything but modern bed. Breakfast from 7:30 to 8:30. Then I take off for my studio, a sort of English-looking structure in the middle of the woods. 3 tables, a cot, and a fireplace. Lunch is delivered somewhere around noon. It's still like this. No phones, no visitors, just you and your demons and your battles for clarity, coherence, creation. In short, a great place to work. So that was his second residency. And then moving on to his third and final residency, April 1st to May 30th, 1960. This was in the Mansfield studio where I have not stayed, but I did have a fellow take me over there. This is where he had a huge breakthrough with another country. This is where Rufus Scott became the kind of central character. And of course, Another Country became a bestseller, and along with The Fire Next Time, catapulted him into the civil rights movement and the public consciousness. He was on the cover of Time magazine that next year. Of course, then also the FBI started surveying him and all sorts of other stuff that drove him away from the States even more. But this was a really, really important stay here, in part because of that, but also because he struck up a lifelong friendship with the leftist writer Kay Boyle. It started one night, as these things sometimes do. Baldwin was afraid to walk back from the dining hall to his studio in the dark. So Kay Boyle walked him to his studio. But then she was afraid to walk to her studio. So Baldwin walked her to her studio. But then he was afraid to walk back. So he stayed there all night, and they talked and were both very committed to the civil rights movement. And they had a lifelong friendship. And there's a poem in your program that she wrote about him and her time there. And I want to end just by emphasizing that sort of last part, which is the sense of community that can be built among artists at MacDowell, which has definitely been my experience and was his. Baldwin used MacDowell as a model for future sanctuaries that he created abroad in Istanbul and especially in the south of France. In the south of France, he created what he called the welcome table, where he would have his friends, everyone from Maya Angelou to Josephine Baker, Nina Simone, and Miles Davis would come through, and they would have conversations about art, politics, life, much like the one that we're probably about to have tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick, and I'm very much looking forward to reading Baldwin: A Love Story when it's out next year. And now onto the main part of our program. There's a very special tradition at MacDowell. When you arrive as an artist in residence, you're assigned a private studio in the woods, much like Baldwin experienced. It's very quiet, it's solitary, there are no phones, no people, no distractions. But in the evening, you get to close your book, put down your paintbrush, close the piano lid, and follow the light through the woods or through a meadow to a beautiful old converted barn called Bond Hall. And there, every night, you might sit in front of a fire, or in the summertime on a porch at sunset, and what you get to do is break bread with artists from around the country and around the world. Writers, architects, composers, painters, filmmakers, dancers, journalists, all engaged in dialogue about everything. Tonight's conversation is inspired by this kind of interdisciplinary dialogue that is such a core part of the MacDowell ethos. For MacDowell Presents 2024, I'd like to welcome some very, very special guests. Choreographer, director, author, dancer, and national treasure, Mr. Bill T. Jones. Critically acclaimed actress, director, producer, advocate, and visual artist, Miss Lucy Liu. And tonight they are in conversation with best-selling and award-winning and now HBO showrunner, author, Marlon James.
Hey guys, thanks for coming out. The teacher made me just trying hard to suppress on a school night, because I keep saying that. You know, God, I was thinking of all the ways we should begin this conversation. I thought, you know, let's just get into the middle of it. Let's talk to the elephant in the room, which is what the hell do we do now? It's how does art respond to this moment? How do we respond to this moment? One of the things I think I resist the whole sort of is art even valid argument, because I think anybody who's really questioning that wouldn't be in this room. One of the things I've always said, it's funny sometimes how friends of art keep wrestling about the importance of art and why do we need it. You know who don't need convincing? Enemies of art. Enemies of art already know art's power. That's why they try to suppress it and ban it and burn it. But we wrestle with that, and I want to start with that. What now? How do we respond to this moment?
Do you mind if I read a little bit from
Absolutely.
James Baldwin? That's not very much, but I think there's something in it that made me think of you both. And the operative word is, well, maybe after I finish what the word is. And it's from the evidence of things not seen. This is about the murders of the children in Atlanta, and he was invited by a writer from Playboy magazine to write a piece, and so this is his. But I will start here. It is not so easy to follow a story occurring in one's own country from the vantage point of another one. From afar, one may imagine that one perceives the pattern, and one may, but as one is not challenged, or more precisely, menaced by the details, the pattern may be nothing more than something one imagines oneself to be able to remember. Mm-hmm. And after all, what I remembered, or imagined myself to remember, of my life in America before I left home, was terror. And what I am trying to suggest by what one imagines oneself to be able to remember is that terror cannot be remembered. One blots it out. The organism, the human being, blots it out. One invents or creates a personality or a persona. Beneath this accumulation, rock of ages, sleeps or hopes to sleep that terror which the memory repudiates. Yet it never sleeps. The terror which is not the terror of death, which cannot be imagined, but the terror of being destroyed. Artist, huh? And you ask, what now?
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know how you feel, but after recent events, terror has been something that has made itself known in my gut more than usual. Is that a place to begin? With how are we dealing with fear, with terror?
Absolutely.
That was just stunning, and I think the feeling of fear is so scary because it's, in this time, it's not tangible. Like when you see somebody coming after you or coming at you, you can see it physically. With your eyes, you can sense it. You can feel it. You can feel the blow, the scrape, the tear. But when you feel it and you can't touch it, but you know it's there, it is a sensation that is cellular. And I think in some ways that's where art comes from, that deep place of needing to release and express it, or to understand it and to look at it and make it physical. Mm-hmm. You know, like with your movement, with your understanding of it, it's an obstruction that you create and then release. And I think now for us, and you know, everyone has a different political standpoint, obviously, but for us to understand what you said, pressure creates something beautiful. And we have to take what this is and how it is and unite that feeling to create something beautiful, because you cannot, there are some forces that cannot be stopped, right? There is an inertia that has begun. We need to understand that gravity in that science manner and to not flee from it. A lot of people are leaving the country. A lot of people are, afraid of, for their lives and for their friends and for it's against humanity ultimately.
Yeah, when you mentioned that, what I thought of, especially with this election, is that it felt like almost like a Chilean election or an Argentinian election to me. And coming from one of those countries, it's the one type of deja vu I did not expect to get. It's weird being a Jamaican or a Nigerian or somebody from Ecuador seeing somebody fall for the strongman, and who's basically just another snake oil salesman. And but it also makes me wonder if it's the kind of movement that calls for a sort of a Pablo Neruda kind of art or a Václav Havel kind of art.
Which is what?
Which is art that's kind of protest even simply by existing. That in some ways art speaks truth to power just because it's art. Because there's always been an attitude to harness or control or regulate art. And there have always been artists outside of that. We can go back and forth on the poet Nicholas Guillen, who's considered a great Cuban poet. He's also kind of a sellout. Do not go on Twitter and destroy my life. But it's different from, say, Reinaldo Arenas, who, in speaking truth to power, got deported and so on. There's something about this moment of, and I actually like the word terror, because I think because it's abstract. Because one of the things that it made me feel, and you may feel this too, and I didn't expect to feel it here, is not the sense that something is going to happen, but it could. It's a sense that I don't think they're gonna find a way to deport me, but they could. And that kind of, let's call it terror possibility, is the last kind of deja vu I expected.
Well, do you agree with Mr. Baldwin, who says that terror cannot be remembered? I mean,
think,
there's a whole body of Holocaust literature, right? I was surprised when he said that. Terror cannot be remembered, he said.
I think there is something there. I mean, I think people who have trauma and they just black out their childhood. I mean, there's things that happen, and it's that book, The Body Keeps the Score, where it's in there. You don't know where it's coming from. You think it's from a discussion or an argument that happened. You think it's triggered from that, but it's something deeper than that. And so it's a sense in a form of protection to keep yourself safe and present as much as possible, but it's still living in you. And if you don't process it, it will eat you alive. And so in some ways, terror is not remembered. I mean, look at what's happening. History is repeating itself because we don't remember. We don't recall it. And the idea of racism that is so, it's been exposed. It's exposed, and you can't deny it now, right? So you can say, oh, there was some fuckery that went on with the internet.
It's an F-bomb kind of evening.
I'm sorry, but it's on. It's on,
all right.
guys.
Okay.
And but in fact, now you take two and to see it go across the board, there is something that is being spoken, and it is really exclaiming itself. It's not a quiet storm. And I think knowing that it's coming, like you're saying that it could possibly happen, I think if anything, everyone's geared up to know it's going to happen. You can't just sit there and wait idly. It's like you have to be prepared.
I mean, for better or worse, Trump is a man of his word. when it comes to oppressing other people, that is. And he has,
Maybe we should make a pact tonight. We don't say his name.
okay.
No, I'm serious. I think
Beetlejuice.
psychically around my house right now, because all dinner conversations are controlled by him. So my husband has made me agree that we don't say the name at the dinner table. Now, is that
Should we do that?
Yeah. And why don't we say it? Because it's psychological what's going on right now. He has, how's the term go? He's taken up free rent in our head and heart. So that is what I think it's, because that's what we're talking about.
Right.
But if it wasn't the orange tea, there's a line of people ready to step in. Okay, now here we are, 3 artists come here to honor another great artist. Is this what we should be talking about? Should we be talking about the boogaboo? Or what? Or what? I'm curious to know what these folks are thinking as well. Is this the right thing? Are we being manipulated here? Have we been colonized in a way by our enemies? And they are. I do feel them as my enemy.
Well, yeah, I think, and even if we don't think they're our enemies, they think we are. I think, Jeanette Winterson once said that she was talking about reading, not even writing, just reading. The thing about reading that scares people is that it's an act of free will and it's a private act.
One more time, once again?
It's an act of free will and it's a private act. And people have always scared about what we do in private. That's why they legislate the bedroom for so long. Because, freedom can come in your bedroom. The biggest epiphanies of my life happened in my bedroom because of a book. So it's easy. It concerns me, for example, when people don't realize that if you start to take things from libraries, you're going to start taking from homes soon. Because that's the thing that scares us, that liberation can come in your bedroom, can come under the covers because you're reading the book you're not supposed to be reading. So I'm concerned about that. I am concerned about the ways, the sort of carefree and domestic ways in which we allow a kind of oppression. And I wonder if in this moment we're just sort of not trained to see it. Sometimes I feel like I'm Cassandra, in the sense that, didn't you see this happen? Like, oh no, you weren't in Congo in the 70s. You have no idea what this is. The ways in which people can come together because they all have a grievance in common, and not realizing that's all they have, and that itself is a cancer that can eat itself. But I mean, but I want to go back to the question you're saying, and why are we here, and what do we do? And to an extent, one thing we do is keep on doing what we're doing. I think we have a way of thinking that it's not enough, but I also think that is also a kind of lie we tell ourselves. And as I said, enemies of art know we're already doing too much.
I do think that there is a circuitry that occurs in, an alliance with one another, whether you're an artist or not, there is a unity and there's a beauty in it too. And I think that's something that we have to unmask and recognize and remember. And it only takes like a prick, like a small pinpoint of something to let something leak out and then let it burst. You don't. I think sometimes people feel it's too overwhelming to do something. Like it's too much. It's too much for me. It's too big a task. I can't change the world. And in fact, what you can do is you can live by experience, and that's all you can do.
What do you mean by live by experience?
Like, if you live your life in a way that you feel is climate friendly or is kind or is good, or that you create your art and you dedicate yourself to that or to meditation or whatever it is, you are living a real piece of art. you're living that act, and you can hope that it can inspire other people, but this is all we can do. I mean, we are all mortal. So what do we want to spend our time working on or being? Because, it's not about living, it's about dying. So knowing that, how do you want to live better?
Could I ask you another question? What do you think of the idea of amor mundi, which is love of the world? Two things. Do you love the world? And is it necessary to love the world to live right now?
I could have sworn I was moderating the discussion. Thank God. I don't know. I think you can love it and hate it at the same time. I think you can love a lot of it fiercely and hate a lot of it just as fiercely. I think you can love people and hate oppression. I think both can be powerful forces. I teach writing, and every now and then I come across young writers who you can tell they just read Kurt Vonnegut. And I have to deal with pregnant triplet aliens, but they're saying something about politics. And one of the things that people don't understand about Vonnegut is that Vonnegut cared. That you don't write that kind of stuff if deep down you're not crying. That he actually cared passionately about the world and the country and people. And you don't write books like that. And it's easy to get lost in the wit and the sarcasm and the wordplay. And a lot of people do it, and the world is full of horrible Vonneguts. Because none of them realize that he actually cared. So I do think you can.
It's a should word. I mean, we're talking to young people.
Right.
Find a way to love the world, warts and all. Because that's what I think. 'Cause another question I wanted to ask you, you use the word beautiful. What is beautiful?
I mean, I think going back to what you said about the world, I mean, in some ways, it's contracted somewhat, and it's also expanded because you stay closer to the people that you feel are like-minded, and also you see how expansive it is because you thought you knew so much, but you know very little. And I think what's beautiful is if you look at nature and its perfection and the cycle of life and the cycle of seasons, and this is what happens, and this is the repeat of some of the things that we've seen that people try to erase, which is why they're banning books, which is why they're trying to erase, homosexuality or queerness or trans, or to deny people, who they want to be, because they don't want uniqueness. They don't want somebody special. They want the homogeny.
So beauty is, I'm really trying to
grasp.
I'm trying to find what is it we really have in common. Because that seems to me the key right now, and it's not original to me, but we live in a world where we have lost traditions. There's no religion, there's no civic belief. We have a constitution. What is it that we have in common? And I used to say, well, you know beauty when you see it. And beauty is its own reward. I'm not, are you sure? Do you anymore have this solid belief that this is universally understood as beautiful? Because that is how I get to the question, maybe I am not able to cope with the horror that is coming. And what I do is tend my garden, which is a time-honored strategy. If you're able to, tend your garden, have your friends, take care of children, live a life that is surrounded with beauty. Let the world take care of itself. That's the other option. Because I want to be honest here tonight, because, this is the deal right now. Are we really trying to say, everybody in this room tonight, you should go out of here knowing what you're going to do? I don't know how to do that. I don't. I thought I did once. I thought I did. But now I'm older. I guess I'm wiser. I think I'm less. I've been, my therapist, my social therapist, Frida Rosen, Trotskyites. She used to say, success is conservatizing.
Yeah, but I actually wonder. I actually wonder if you're selling yourself short.
Maybe.
Because because let's talk about still here, and what still here meant when it came out at the first. It means that now as well, but it also means something greater, because one, you're literally still here. A lot of those fighters are still here. The thing that was supposed to kill us is no longer killing us. I read that ridiculous review that came out. The whole I haven't seen it and I'm not going to type of review.
Oh, you mean the original?
The original review.
Discussing the undiscussable.
Yeah.
I am the undiscussable.
Yeah. So, but you're still here, and that art is still here, and I think that the one thing that critic and say Nancy Reagan would have in common was a hope that this moment would not happen. So I do think I think you're selling yourself short. I think.
Let's since we're just playing here.
Yeah.
That and it's a painful playing.
Yeah.
But what she was saying then, and what her acolytes are even saying now is, does art, and this is to Mr. Baldwin and to us, does art have to have a dimension of disinterestedness? That is what those persons, like the person who I'm a great fan of, who I will not bore you with her name, but she feels that by the loss of tradition, one of the things that we lost was this ability to understand that there are cultural objects that withstand time. Only those objects should we consider art. Other things are entertainment, and there's a very high standard. Those arts are disinterested. It is not about gossip. It is not about someone's orgasm or even their gender, right? Now, this is maybe an antiquated way of thinking, but Mr. Baldwin was quite an aesthete. But he obviously was an aesthete, loved Henry James, right? But he had this feeling that he could make a poetry that included lessons for the real world. And there are persons who say that that was his problem, that when he was a good novelist, but he was a better essayist, and that he should have understood that he cannot do them both. I don't know. I'm throwing out sacrilege here, right? But but it's worth talking about, though, right?
It is, but I also think in a lot of ways it's. I actually think it may be an old way of looking at him. And I also wonder if the risk with looking at art that way is that it's very easy for it to become elitist. It's like, does that mean the poor kid who only has Walmart in back of the bush, Ohio, won't know art? I remember when Nirvana's second album came out, they had a controversial cover, and Walmart demanded that they changed it. And everybody was surprised he changed it. Kurt Cobain changed it. I asked him why. He says, because I came from a town where the only thing happening was Walmart. So whatever cultural education I'm going to have, and clearly it led to a Nirvana, came from these places that are not necessarily art. So I do, it's a very thin line when you start to curate and then you start to shut off. I read this book once about architecture, and it said that the crowning achievement of 80s architecture was building an ivory tower to lock themselves all in. That none of their no building in the 80s serves any purpose. But it comes back to that, because like you do art that's frequently directly in the public domain and responds to reaching out to the public. Do you think there's something to that art is that we have lost something because, I don't know, art is popular, or I don't know?
Well, we've lost a tradition. And do we believe that there are certain objects, social objects that exist higher than others because of a great talent and disinterestedness in the maker, as opposed to our modern world where we're extremely self-involved. I mean, that's what that's maybe what we're asking, right? And how do you feel that you make you're a really great actress, but you make works that are designed for masses of people, right?
Yes, and I think that, the work that you do when you share it, whatever medium it is, it's not for everybody, and I think when you say, like, he was a better essayist than a novelist.
Now, that's not my opinion,
Right.
but
when you quote, I do think that there is something where you have to try, because I'm a visual artist as well, and I don't think that my work will probably not be, received well until probably post-mortem. Because they want to see me in this particular category and in that category only. And so it's a little bit of a struggle, but if you don't try, if you don't do it, if you don't, do what you have to do, because it's almost like a compulsion, you will die. And that's how I felt. Like, if I don't express myself in that way, I think I'm going to suffocate. And so people will say, well, she's a better actress than she is an artist, or I don't really love her work this way, but I do. It's just, it's really so difficult, because it's like saying you can't be a musician and a dancer, or you can't be a writer and a dancer. It's too prescriptive. And I think it becomes dangerous when one says this is the pinnacle. Because that's that opinion, that's that thought, that's that race, that's that culture. So
however,
we have
I
to be
think
careful with that.
excuse me, but
Yeah.
I, like other people, I believe, and I dropped acid at Woodstock. I have gone naked running. I've done like freedom. But as I get older, I want people who make strong choices. And you can't do everything. I want people who really do close the aperture a little bit and really give their whole self and heart to something. And the reason I led us here was because you started us at a very high level in saying, what now? And it sounds like the only thing that I could say was, I'm a mean motherfucker and I'm gonna fight, or I'm gonna tend my own garden and go in pursuit of personal beauty. And is that allowed? Is that allowed? And nobody has to say it out loud here. It's not the Oprah Winfrey show, right? That is, love her, but you know what I'm getting at, But I'm saying, in your heart, do you think you have a right to say, no, I am going to tend my garden. I do not let others do it.
I didn't grow up here. So
we notice, we hear it.
No. So there's so many people I know in countries like where I came from who didn't set out to be public, who actually were tending their gardens, and people came and go, you can't tend it that way. So I don't think, I'm not saying that the oppressors are coming at all times. What I'm saying is that I don't think by tending your garden, you're dropping out. I actually think tending your garden is, in a way, rebellion.
Yes.
Yeah, I think.
Right. So
yeah.
it is an option.
It is an option, because the idea that somebody won't come for your garden, is not true. As I said, I grew up surrounded by people who actually did not set out to make public statements. They didn't shy away from it either, but they were, for better or worse, tending to their own little gardens until somebody go, we don't like your plants.
But Marlon, I'll push it. There's something you're trying to tell. You're pushing back. And you're saying, in a way, it is an illusion. This is what I'm hearing. It is an illusion that I can withdraw and tend my garden. Because even though you think that's the case, the brown shirts are coming. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that, again, it's not that they are, it's that they could. And that's what I'm saying. This moment has left me with the most uneasy sort of deja vu. I may very well go through the next 4 years and absolutely nothing happens. What I'm saying is I'm looking over my shoulder the whole time.
Yeah.
So even if I go and do whatever sort of respond in a private way, I don't quite stop looking over my shoulder.
Right.
I also want to respond to what you said about like how things for you are tighter, and I think you.
No,
can,
I've focused my
Right.
lens down a little.
Yes, and I think that's because you know what you want to put your energy towards, and I think the whole point is to sort of open up and then sort of find out where the radius is and where do you want to be, what do you want close to you.
Now, what do you mean the whole point?
Well, when you go
For a
around, when you're
25-year-old
like,
or for a
when-
72-year-old?
it doesn't matter how old. It doesn't matter your age.
I think it does. I think
But
it does.
when, I mean, when you're younger and you're sort of just, experimenting and doing things and trying things and, you're immortal essentially and you're bulletproof, it's a different thing. But you have to almost do that and explore. And young people have to have an ego to really feel that they need to be feeling themselves, right? And some people are continuing to be in their 80s and still completely lost and still trying everything. But when you know what you want to do and how you want to do it, it just becomes more concentrated and you don't dilute it with all of these things. Do you want to tend your garden? Yes. Will they come for you? Yes, they can do all that. And in some ways, like in other countries, in China, and there is no privacy. There is no you. And we have this world where we have our iPhones, our iHomes, our iCars. It's not a space that we, social media is not really social because you're doing it individually. It's consuming you. It's not, and we're being eaten by technology and it's also assisting us. So there's this dichotomy that is happening, which is why when James Baldwin, even though technology was different, even now, people go away so they can shut down and refocus and not just recharge, but see what comes out. And sometimes what comes out when you're alone, can be really scary. When I work in a group of people for a film, it's a team, it's a crew. They're all together doing their specialized things to make something beautiful and, or entertaining or moving. And when you go into a room by yourself and you have to really think and activate and react, it can be a very isolating space where you have to be confronted, with many things.
And I feel thank you very much for that insight. I feel that one of the challenges that I think I am vulnerable to is, they say that in an authoritarian regime, if you mind your manners, if you don't say certain things, you can have your lovely home, you can have you can have everything, just don't cross the powers that be. And so what is blasphemous in what I am suggesting right now, and this is what I think, I'm going to guess, a pretty well-heeled room, right? And I think everyone likes their latte and their cappuccino. And look at this historic hotel. How much are you willing to pay to keep the veneer of normalcy? And I think that's what I'm trying to, I'm in public asking myself, because I used to say I'm a bad motherfucker. I'm going to be in the front lines. I'm going to be like the monks in Vietnam who set themselves on fire for a principle. I'm not so sure anymore. I want to be comfortable. I want to have beauty and love. I have a good, healthy dose of anger, and I can't trust myself that sometimes I don't step in caca because of my own making. But I'm also 72, and I'm thinking, what battles can you win? I'm saying this on behalf of us all right now, that we don't get too pious. What are you willing to pay for the lovely life that you have right now? What are you willing to ignore? Because I think that's what's going to come down the pike for us.
I have my response to that for you is a question. You talk about rage. Then where do you put your anger?
Where do I put my anger?
No, look, you can't look in the audience.
No, I am not a pleasant person when I'm working. I'm not a pleasant person when I am insecure when I'm working. So it's a joke, actually, in a way, I throw chairs. I have no, bad, all right when you're a sexy young 30-year-old, but when you get a 72-year-old man who is going off like that, and young people are in your face, wait a minute, let's call the police. They're going to cancel this mother. He shouted at me. He shouted at me. Yeah, people, they don't take it. And mine is a young person's endeavor. Those bodies that do this work have to be young bodies, and they have a sense right now that they have. You cannot raise your voice at me. Tell Martha Graham that. You all know Martha, of course, right? Right? But they say, well, that was then and this is now. Are they wrong? You say, well, until you see it on Instagram the next day or on Facebook. But my point is, right now, no, the anger is something I have to control, right? And I have to control it because I want he and I to have a good life. I want my wonderful Janet Wong, who is brilliant, to want to work with me. There's young people who want to be there. But when they see this guy who I've studied in school, do you know what he did in rehearsal today? You know how angry he was, unfair he was? I'm out of here. No, they don't say I'm out of here. But they'll let you threaten you. They're going to. Well, how do you deal with your anger? What are you doing with it?
I'm still figuring that out. It's funny. We were at. We were all at this thing. I call it the Jeff Bezos Illuminati weekend. And I remember they had the guy from Just Mercy on. I don't know if you were there that year. Brian Stevenson.
He's brilliant.
Yeah, but I walked out at one point.
Why?
Not necessarily in protest or anything. A certain part just got too intense. And I won't say who I ran into there. It was another black guy. And I said to him, I just don't know where to put all this rage.
Yeah. That museum was heavy. Did you go to the EGI?
No.
Oh, has anyone been there? It's very difficult. And I went with a group of white friends. I told them, I think we should not try to do this show together. I think you have to know, you have to see what you're looking at, and deep memory.
Yeah.
Deep memory. And so.
No, that's similar. It's like when I went to the African American Museum, and at some point you have to pass Emmett Till's coffin.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And that's when I lost it. I was ugly crying, and I didn't care. I couldn't. Yeah. But I was also with somebody who probably wouldn't understand.
You weren't in the mood to school people.
No. But again, it's a question I have yet to answer. Even my therapist asked me, "Were you
have a therapist?"
I know, I have two. It's like, what do I? Yeah. What about you?
What about you?
I was just going to ask you a question though, Bill, because
you're not going to answer my "what do you do with your anger" question?
I will. Trust me. What is it that makes you feel insecure? Like when you're working, is it the process that you're going through, or is it something within yourself that's making you feel like everyone's looking at you, waiting for you to know, and it's frustrating because you're still in process?
Well, I put it this way. For me, I say to my therapist, I have Mr. Obama syndrome.
What the hell is that?
No, that is, this is, you have got to be cooler than anybody in the room. You're smarter than anybody in the room. And I don't know, how do you can just shut your ears, don't behave like a nigger.
Canceled. Sorry.
You know what I'm getting at? In other words, what does that mean? You cannot ever lose it.
Yeah. Did you read the...
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like I am not him. And at this moment, the situation demands that I pull off and have the answers, and I don't give my shit away. And that, when I feel myself not that, I'm Estella Jones's son as well. And I start screaming and all of those things, which sometimes makes magic and sometimes makes ruin. Is that what you meant? That's what.
Yeah, like when you're doing something, when somebody, worked with people that you admire, and you when you meet them in person, sometimes it's a heartbreak because there's an insecurity there that is what you didn't expect, and then that creates a ferocious animal. So in lieu of working with somebody that you can learn from and grow from, instead you're getting someone who's trying to grasp at anything, any kind of light that they can shine on themselves instead of on us, in that sense.
Yeah.
So as an artist, insecurity is something that lives in us, but also when you're working alone, if I'm painting, it's different than if you're working in a group with bodies that are moving and you're trying to tell them what you want them to do because it's in your mind, right?
Or coax it out of them. I mean, that's the work I do is process work. Oftentimes, you have a problem. Let's solve the problem. And when we solve the problem, there will be a product left. And that is what a certain type of avant-garde dancing coming out of the traditions of the 60s and 70s was about. It was task-based. Solving problems was its own form. So yeah, the person you're describing, I don't want to be that person. And so I am trying to understand, even in this conversation tonight, how to be really honest with myself. I know the world wants a savior, and they want you to be it, right? But what do you say? I'm not that. I'm not Mr. Obama. And at this moment, I want to throw a chair, I feel terrible about it later, but at that moment, that was honest.
Right.
So what were you getting at? I mean,
What I'm saying is, do you ever say, hey, this is a process, we're all in it together, it's not easy, it's a struggle. Do you ever preface it with that when you go in and say, and what, stuff happens, and what happens in this room stays in the room. This is part
although I can't be sure anymore.
Right, that's true.
No,
That's
you
true.
really,
But
there's
you're saying it.
nobody signed a contract that they will
Right.
not go out and talk or put it online. You know that right
that's
now.
usually what happens.
Yeah.
So trying to be candor to head off discord. Is that what you're saying? Be
Well,
honest.
also to be vulnerable and to say to somebody, look, when this happens, it happens to me as well. And even if I'm 72 years old, it's still as raw to me as when I was in my 20s. And there's still things that are coming out of me. So
I don't expect that they care about that.
really?
They don't have to. That's your ship, man. Clean up your act. I can't. You had a difficult childhood. You've been born in racist America. Clean up your act. I don't have to make room for your insecurity. This is the new rules. Those are the new rules. Now,
Whose rules are those, though?
Pardon?
Whose rules are those?
My rules.
Right.
We wanted them to be that way. We wanted them to be fierce, speak truth to power. We wanted in Zen Buddhism, they say the freshest mind in the room, the beginner, should lead. We want the lead to actually say, I have a right to speak. Now, with that comes this person I didn't mention who believes that we've lost tradition. And tradition used to say, by your very nature of being younger than me, you should listen to me. Now, what happened to that?
I don't know.
And are you all right with that?
Yeah, but tradition also say if you're a man who loves men, you should stay at the back. So
Yeah, well,
I'm just saying that it's not. Sometimes tradition just means we've been doing the wrong thing too long. Slavery is a tradition, and I which is not. I'm advocating some sort of brand new revolutionary thing. I actually get what he's saying, and I think that it's like this is one of the reasons why I don't like a lot of pop music is I hear no blues.
You hear no blues?
I don't hear any blues. So that's the way in which a lack of tradition bugs me. I can tell there is no blues here, and I think it results in a kind of music that's headless, in a way. But that's my old man gripe against pop music. That my laser focus now is like music. Like I God bless the Swifties. I know 2 Taylor Swift songs.
I don't know any of it. Shh, don't tell anybody. My sister, she had my back in the election.
Mm-hmm.
She got those people out there voting. Good for her.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't know. I don't know if what we should. I'm not saying I have a concrete answer for this, but I'm not sure what we should do with our rage is Obama it.
I'm sorry?
And I'm using Obama as a verb. I'm not sure what we should do with our rage is to Obama it. Like
No,
when
you asked me personally.
Yeah.
It was a very
Yeah.
personal moment because this is what I do. I'm not. What is the categorical imperative? Any philosophers in the room? Kantians? You know what I'm talking about. In other words, behave in such a way that your action could become a generalized action, right? That's how you judge in a world that has no morality. The categorical imperative tells you when you're about to do something, what would you think if this was the standard that everyone did? And that is how we find morality in a world that does not have morality, right? So that's what I'm saying about the way I try to roll, and the way what I admire about that man, Mr. Obama. He knows everyone's watching him. As my therapist tells me, you don't know what he's like when Michelle has to slap him around at home. You don't know that he's petulant and childlike, but his persona, and that's half the game, isn't it? Look, you know about persona, right? I don't need to know really what was going on the other side of that camera. I only need to know this and what that writer has put in, in your mouth, and that's what it is. That is another lesson that I'm learning. I'm wondering, did Mr. Baldwin have to understand that lesson?
The thing about Obama, Lord knows I don't want this to turn into an Obama thing, but I'll say this. The thing about Obama, I think, to become Obama, you had to be running for president from you were 16.
I don't understand. What do you mean?
Meaning, there's a really big biography of Obama that I read, so y'all wouldn't have to. And it was pointed out one of the reasons why he could become president is that he's been running for it from he was a teenager. And it affected everything right down to choice of girlfriends. So to be him, to be that kind of person means you have to be living a regimented life.
You don't think you can cultivate it?
What's the difference, though?
Well, when you have little children playing in the sandbox and somebody hauls off and slaps the shit out of somebody, right? How do you, this behavior, without making them feel guilty, without making them feel small, how do you change the discourse so they understand the categorical imperative? That is, would you want to live in a world where people treat each other like that, dear?
Not necessarily, but I don't know.
No, I'm saying talking to a 5-year-old.
True, but
I'm saying you start that early, teaching a person to lead with their, I can't believe I'm saying this, but lead with their reason. Lead with, be emotional, but understand, and I know, we black folks, we black folks, and black men in particular, we are on a short fuse. We got 300, 400, 500 years of fucking slavery on our neck, and we felt, so I have a right sometime to hit you up beside your head, a woman standing across from me, or another man. This is the rules, and you're right, it's all bullshit, but it's what made me. Now, how did Maya Angelou used to say? Break the chain? That was she was saying. How do you break the chain? Which is what I'm trying to bring it to in the time we have left in this conversation, because you said, what's next, right? How do we know these things, these great machinations of culture and politics, but how do you break this sense that we are helpless and that we have to do, how do you do it? How do you live and How can you live and be loving and happy in a world that is not loving and happy? Individual, right? Back to the question, tend your garden. Maybe you're not supposed to be out there in the picket line. I'm not even sure I don't know if there's any activists in the room. Is that still working in the street with signs? Is it still working? Yeah. There are people who've been doing it, like, what is his name, Mika White, who was head of the Wall Street a few years ago.
Occupy Wall Street.
I heard him speaking at Bard, and he said that he thought that had failed. That type of advocacy had failed.
Who, David Graeber?
No, Micah White. He was one of the organizers of Occupy Wall Street. Was asked to talk about. He said it failed because we didn't win. We got to look. How do we win? Right now, I think every Democrat is asking themselves that question. We might have the moral high ground, but does it matter? We got to win. And how do we win? You know?
I do think showing up, though, for those protests or those gatherings matter, even if we don't win.
How so? How so?
Because if that doesn't happen, if that togetherness or the voice doesn't happen, it's just silence. So there's no, like maybe there's some people that are not going out, but those things really do matter. And I believe that because I think it's a manifestation of that collective energy. And what I know and I understand what is it to win, and sometimes, you're in the race. It's not about winning, all the time.
No.
And it's
Okay, we just came out of this.
Well, in a different way. I'm just saying, like, it's just a different way of committing yourself towards something. Because you can't sit idly at home and hope for something to happen. That's something you can't manifest. You have to physically show up. And those things matter. That, are we still working and against racism? Does it mean they shouldn't have showed up? Like, they shouldn't have walked together. They shouldn't have, come together. That's important.
You're talking in the past.
Yes.
No,
even
Marlon had started us today
in the
saying,
pandemic.
"What now? What do we do now? We don't have to do the civil rights struggles of the 1960s. We have another kind of struggle.
And
right
we're
now.
still going to have to show up.
Yes.
We still have to show up, and however way we can, with our art, with our physical bodies, with our voices. And yes, it's exhausting. The advocacy part of it is, and not knowing that there's an end. Like there's no finish line, and knowing that you have to keep going. I believe that.
Yeah, I believe that as well. But I also think there is such a thing as I'm too tired to show up.
I'm too tired to show up.
Yeah, or I've fought enough battles.
It happens.
I think, yeah. It's.
You've heard the Black Power nap?
Yeah.
I was schooled by some young folks to self-care. So what do you mean self-care? Sometimes you have to take a Black Power nap. What? But they're not wrong.
Yeah.
They're not wrong. Psychologically, emotionally, but my generation was you're supposed to run until you drop, and then Fannie Lou Hammer and heaven will reach down and say.
The only problem with that, I can't speak for this country. I can speak for mine. The problem with running until you drop is that nobody's around to teach other people to run because everybody fell. So I'm a big believer in this Black Power nap.
You do believe in it?
Yeah, I'm getting a T-shirt with that. I think. So we could monopolize the stage for the rest of the night. I think. Do we even have time for questions?
Now let's do that. Let's
Yeah.
do that. Put them in the hot seat. What are you doing with your anger, ladies and gentlemen? No, I'm not fooling around. Really, what are you doing with your anger?
I can't see, so hopefully somebody sees. questions. You know, I used to teach class. I'll just point at you.
I wish Marlon James been my teacher.
Hello.
Hi.
Tiffany from WNBC. I'm a producer. I'm sure you guys have all seen the memes with black women. We're like, we're done because we're constantly carrying. We need to step back and take care of ourselves because there's so much going on. I'm from New Orleans, so I understand a little bit, with all due respect, a little bit more than some other people here. My godfather was the highest ranking African American in Louisiana Health Department. He was put in charge as an experiment to see if blacks could lead whites. He has taught me how to handle corporate America. And he laughs at me when I tell him things. He's like, oh, and they told you A, B, and C. And I'm like, yes. He's like, there's nothing new under the sun. Right now, especially for black women, a lot of us are like, we need to sit back and take a breath and tend our own garden. Because that is important. Because if you don't put your own oxygen mask on, you can't help anybody else. So at this point right now, with what's going on, I will tell you the first election, after I produced my newscast, I called my godfather and boo-hooed. And he told me—
This is 2016.
Yes. He told me, Tiffany, get a hold of yourself because we have a lot we have to do. He said, first of all, you have to sustain yourself. Yes, this is going to be hard, but guess what? Black folks have been through much worse. So now, with what's going on now, I personally look at it and I'm like, we've already been through this already. Could it get worse? Yes, but we know what to expect. Black folks, especially us in the South, we have been through all kinds of stuff. So we're generally prepared. We have our loins girded. We are ready to take that punch. For me, I look at other folks and I'm like, you guys have no clue what's about to go down. So again, for black women, a lot of us are like, you know what? I'm going to tend my own garden, and I love that. Because sometimes you need to step back and say, we have told you over and over and over again, because we see things that a lot of folks don't.
No, Tiffany, right?
Yes, sir.
May I call you by first name?
Yes,
What
sir.
Marlon the challenge he put forward was, what about the children? Now, who is going to teach them if we, and if I'm allowed to enter this group of black women, if we decide to tend our own garden, who is going to teach them? And do we want them to be taught, but somebody's got to be out there, right? Who does that? How does that get done?
Tending your own garden is part of the lesson. When you teach somebody how to take care of themselves, that's part of the lesson. There was an incident that happened that my godfather said, do it, join this group, but you have to realize nothing is going to come from it. It's just for show. But you have to make a good front and be there and be present and be there and say, this is good, this is not good. But realize that nothing is going to come from it, but you have to stand up. So in tending my own garden, he was telling me, he said, you know what? Do it, but don't get upset if nothing comes from it, because it's a front. He was 100% right. So in that way, I can tend my own garden, and I can be there as a representative, but I know what this other person is thinking.
And you will be able to inspire that next
Yes.
generation.
Yes.
And that inspiration is what we're a group of artists here trying to talk about, because we have this feeling that we're supposed to be, our hands are supposed to be on some celestial levers as artists, makers, a celestial lever. And if we're not doing it, how does it get done? The children have to do it. I think that's what you were saying, right?
Yeah, but I also think the garden that you're attending, the children are allowed. Yeah, that it's not a place. It's not like I was saying about the architects who build these buildings to lock themselves in. I think even if it's like, even if the cookout is invitation only, some people are invited to the cookout. I think that, and I'm assuming that, that it's not a situation where I'm going to build my own garden so children stay away.
It's a community.
Yeah. But and I think that's how they start. It's that again. It's. I think sometimes we underestimate starting small.
I think the one thing that I have in this conversation tonight, community, I've been trying to speak purely from the point of view of individuals, which is so that we don't step into our own bullshit here. Can you go into your heart and ask what your behavior is? So I wasn't thinking about community. But so community is, okay, what can be said about community? We need it, yes or no?
Yeah, but I think it's, if somebody strays into your garden, I don't think you're gonna whip out your shotgun.
Well,
and if you don't,
what did Kamala say? She said she had a Glock.
Well,
Were you
okay,
shocked?
some people. But I think if somebody wanders, if that child wanders into your garden and you allow them to stay there, you just instantly build community.
Right.
And I think if I can just bring that back to what, he found in those dinners is community. And that, in some ways, we don't know how much that affected him and how it affected his work. And I just think we are affected with what's going on in the world, but by each other and with each other. And, that's so important.
That's the insidious thing right now, is that when we voted in my suburban town, yes, I am Bridge and Tunnel, yes, when we voted in that town, I'd never seen so many people at my little library. But it was the first time I was looking at people, their shoes, their hair, skin color. Harris, Trump. And obviously I saw the figures. Most of the people in my little town went Trump. And, well, it made me feel like you are an elite, myopic personality, and this is the universe giving you a good Zen slap. Yeah. Hey, do we have enough time for another one?
One more question, yeah.
Who is that? The fabulous Miss Jacqueline Woodson?
Oh man, y'all are so fabulous. And thank you, MacDowell. This is amazing. I have a question for you, Bill, in terms of talking about, and I just love hearing y'all talk, but in terms of talking about art and it lasting past this kind of attempted erasure. I think what's happening now, as someone who writes for young people and watching the banning and burning of books and realizing that there are so many artists that we probably don't know because of this erasure, and the fact that now it's legislated, so librarians and teachers and people are very, very afraid. So, in terms of thinking about art as something that if it's good enough, it can last, I got questions given.
It's
given
dubious,
this.
isn't it? Well,
Yeah.
This is a great thinker, but she's a great European thinker who did survive as a Jewish person, who did survive the camps and so on. So I have to give her respect, but she does come from a certain kind of extremely well-educated, and I mean, for her, she could recite German poetry off the top of her head like that. So her notion of and my notion of art are different. But is there anything in her argument that is of use to us now about what do we mean by durability? I've seen your books. They're going to be around, right?
They're banned everywhere, and so I think that's the thing is there's so many artists who we don't know about now, right? Because they have been erased, and so it's not a question of of people surviving because their art reaches a certain mass or a certain class, because there's this intentional, has been this historical intentional erasure of certain artists, queer artists, black artists, now trans artists. So I think it is something to think about in terms of, whether we're writing for the masses or if we're quote unquote elite or whatever it is. there is a way that artists are being attacked, especially artists of color, queer artists, and black artists, and black and brown artists. So I think.
Jacqueline, may I ask you the question? Do you have anger? And if so, come on
Okay.
with it. And if you do, what are you doing with it?
You know, I think you'd have to be really heavily medicated not to be angry right now, right? So, you know, I think anger is a healthy reaction.
And it's also expensive.
It is
An-
in terms
anger
of medication
is-
and healthcare systems.
Anger is expensive.
It is, but I think, you know, I think most artists have anger, right? And what we've been able to do is channel that anger into something that becomes cathartic and helpful to the community and to the people who don't know how to do that work around catharsis. So yeah, I wouldn't be human if I didn't have anger. And you know, but I'm not letting it eat me up that way.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
We have time, or I think we're done. We're what? Oh, final question.
That was our final.
Oh, that was the final question. Well, we're almost wrapping up, and in the midst of celebrating birthdays, somebody has a birthday, and that person's on this stage. Should we sing the Stevie Wonder version?
Yes, that's the only one. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Lucy. All right, I think we are out of time.
Yes, yeah. Thank you all. Thank
Thank you guys for coming. Are you any wrapping up remarks, or am I wrapping up? All right.